Welcome to the Cabral Concept, where board-certified naturopath and integrative health practitioner Dr. Stephen Cabral shares how he was diagnosed at the age of 17 with a life-altering illness and given no hope for recovery. It was only after studying and traveling all over the world did he discover how to combine ancient Ayurvedic healing practices with state-of-the-art naturopathic and functional medicine to fully rebalance the body and re-energize it with life. It's time to discover how to get well, lose weight, and finally feel alive again. And now, here's your host, Dr. Stephen Cabral.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the show. We are here today with our latest and most up-to-date virus-based podcast. Every couple of weeks, I'm trying to bring you the updated statistics, unbiased, non-media-based coverage, sharing with you exactly what is going on globally as well as right here in the United States. So my goal is to simply share with you what is and not what might be or what the media would have you believe. I will allow everyone to have then their own opinion, and I have no issues with that whatsoever. What I want to do is at least give you the facts. I want to share with you what the real research says from unbiased sources that I will share with you, of course, and I will link them all up here today. I'm not going to give you my opinion. If I do share my opinion, it will be with that caveat, and I will tell you when it's my opinion versus what the facts state. So all of the research can be found on your own and shared with anyone that you'd like. This is all available to anyone, and it's at stephencabral.com/1672. stephencabral.com/1672. I believe that today, going through these numbers, you will start to ask yourself, how is it and why is it that the media is allowed to get away with what they've been sharing with you over the nightly news? And I think, again, as you start to hear what is really going on, you're going to become, as I have been, much more dismayed with the handling of this particular situation, especially in the West, especially in the United States. First off, I just want to share with you some of the global-based statistics. This comes out of Johns Hopkins University of Medicine. They have one of the main virus resource centers. Again, I'm not going to name the particular C word, as I'm calling it, for the virus, and that is because I've already been censored. I don't want to be censored any more than I am, meaning I simply don't want them to completely shut down my social media and other channels as well. But I want to share with you right now is the global cases around the world as of August 28th, when I'm recording this show. It will be out just in 5 days or so from now. I'm recording this show, and we're at about 24.5 million cases. 24,495,232,000 to be specific. So, okay. How many global deaths came from this so far? 832,484. Again, we're looking at total global cases and total global deaths. Please do tune into my previous podcast on the virus. Very specifically, I would like you to listen to this one. Okay, I just did one on the new controversial research on masks last week. I won't be talking about that today, but that one really shows you that some masks, believe it or not, that the media are telling you to wear that it's better than nothing, are actually worse than no mask at all. I couldn't believe that until I actually read the research out of Duke University. Okay, so I would love you to listen to, let me see if I can find the episode. Well, one of them is episode 1651, the top 10 worst virus advice myths. And the next one is who's most susceptible to the virus, 1637. That would be one as well. Okay, those are fine to start. But here's the thing. I go through something called case mortality rate, crude mortality rate, and infection fatality rate. So one of the biggest ways that the media begins to trick you is that they look at all of the people that have been currently tested. And then they divide that by the number of people that have currently passed away from this particular virus. And the numbers always seem extremely high because in the beginning, all we do is test people that have the virus or that we suspect. And those are the people obviously most likely to succumb from the virus. Now, as other testing begins to grow, we see that the fatality rate actually begins to drop. And then finally, when mass testing has been put in place, we see the actual infection fatality rate. I'm beginning to share some of that with you here today. although we do not have antibody testing in place yet, so we can't give you the full number. But I will tell you this, that the mortality rate will begin to drop and drop and drop once we get mass scale, not just nasal swab testing, which tests for the active virus, but actually antibody testing that tests to see who had it in the past that didn't show any symptoms. Because remember, 70% of all people that get this virus have mild symptoms or no symptoms at all. So that goes to show you that 70% of the people that had this virus didn't even know they really had it. Right? They might have thought they just feeling a little run down. Maybe they didn't get as much sleep, a little dryness in the throat, a little tiny cough. So do keep in mind, we will find out one day approximately what that infection fatality rate is. We don't know it yet, but here's the thing. Let me share this with you now. I'm going to give you this step by step. So I want to share first with you in the United States. A lot of people right now really upset with all the people in Florida who were not following the guidelines of staying inside, maybe wearing a mask, etc. I want to share with you the unbiased statistics of what their infection and fatality rate look like per 100,000 people versus a state like Wyoming that has one of the lowest infection rates and mortality rates out there. Okay, and just so that you know that this is completely unbiased information, I'm looking at essentially what I call the heat tracker map, and this is actually listed on the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, from the United States itself. So I'm going to give it to you right now. We're looking at all of the total cases, we're looking at the total deaths, and then we're looking at cases in the last 7 days. So what I'd like to share with you, and again, I'll link this up today. You can head over to stephencabral.com/1672. And when I look at Wyoming, I'm looking at cases per 100,000. And what I see is 638. Now, if I look at deaths per 100,000 people, I'm looking at a rate of 0.009. Okay, so that means out of 100,000 people, 0.009 will actually die when they get this particular virus. Now, remember, that is, when we think about that, that is dramatically lower than even the flu fatality rate. And again, I'm not saying that this isn't as bad as the flu. I'm not even saying it's worse than the flu. What I'm sharing with you is just the straight statistics. Now, so that was Wyoming. There are obviously very, very little there. Now let's talk about Florida. Again, everybody likes to talk about Florida, how poorly they did, etc. Well, let's take a look at that. So they opened things up. They allow a lot more freedom down there. So their cases per 100,000, keep in mind, Wyoming's was 638. Florida, every 100,000, there was 2,627. So you might say, well, there you go. That's so many more, right? That's, how many more is that? 4.5x or something like that? You know, that's a big multiple. And their deaths per 100,000 is 50. So instead of it being 6, it's 50. Now, but let's see what that actually looks like statistically, right? Because you could easily in the news say, well, Florida has 400% more cases than Wyoming and 800% more deaths. So we might say, okay, well, that statistic is true, but a bit sensationalized since the actual mortality rate in Florida is 0.017 out of those 100,000. Again, that is a lower number currently, at least right now on the statistics page, than the average winter flu. So now let's extrapolate that data because we have to understand that not everyone is going to get this virus. It will die out, as most viruses do. As all viruses do, they can be seasonal. We have no reason to believe this particular virus will continue to be seasonal. We have no reason to believe that. I just want to repeat that. There's no reason to believe if there's a SARS-type virus that this will be back again. Because the previous SARS-based viruses do not have these second winds that like a regular flu virus may have. But again, we don't know that yet, so I can't tell you that. So here's the thing, though. If we take that, you have to understand is that we're probably going to have to get to about 40%, maybe a bit more, to create herd immunity of people getting this particular virus. Now, if we look at that, we might say, well, at worst then, approximately 224,000 people will die of this particular virus, or about 118,000. So that's on the lower end. If we just take Wyoming and we just take Florida. Again, these are guesstimates based on current data. They will most likely continue to drop based on the number of tests we run and the lower amounts of fatality. Keep in mind, I know that seems like a big number, and I agree again, but that's opinion, but I do agree. Keep in mind that the typical flu season is somewhere around 60,000, right? So what are we looking at? Well, we're looking at this being twice as many then deaths as flu season. But let's also keep in mind that potentially a good 50% of these are actually from the flu that we're counting as this particular virus. I keep almost saying the C word. So why would I say that? Let me share with you now the actual statistics. So if I look at, and again, this is on the Center for Disease Control page as well. It's not easy information to find. That's why I link it up for you, but it's there for anyone to read, right? It's there for anyone. Check this out. At the peak of the virus around April 11th, which if you go back to my previous podcast, I share with you exactly when the peak was going to be. I'm not a virologist. I'm not an epidemiologist, but for sure I can read the research, I can listen to the true unbiased experts, and I can share that with you. So I'm happy to say that we have been right along the way. Not me, but we have been right along the way of all the experts who are unbiased in this. And then we saw the dramatic fall. Now, did we see a rise in early July to mid-July? We did, when people started going back out for the summer for the most part. But let me share with you the real statistics, because over the past 90 days, there's been about 50,000 deaths. Now, let's take this a little bit deeper, because again, that sounds like a big number. And again, I agree that every life should try to be saved. Every life is someone's mother and father, sibling, grandparents, right? All of those people are important to all of us. Again, I say this all the time, but my parents are in the age bracket that's going to be most susceptible. So obviously, I care about how do we squelch this the best way possible. But let's look on an average week, not over the last 90 days, but an average week, 56,000 people die in the United States of all causes, okay? Some of it just old age. Some of it from obviously health-based issues, the same health issues that people are most likely to die from when they get this virus. And I do hope that you check out my podcast as Who's Most Susceptible. Please go back, check out that podcast. I'll try to link it up here today at stephencabral.com/1672, stephencabral.com/1672. But of course, you can find all my previous podcasts by just typing in virus at stephencabral.com/podcasts. Okay, and I keep them all up there. So I just show people, listen, I'm keeping myself accountable. I'm not going to say outrageous things because I don't take anything down. So you can judge me on everything that I've said in the future, should you choose to. Okay, but let's look at this. Let's look at this because I can give you the real statistics. So last week, all right, the week of 8/15 to 8/22, they have down 3,988 deaths from this particular virus, okay? Average week, 56,000 people die. Now, let's look now at the same 3,988 people. Well, those people could also be a part of the group, which they are, that died from pneumonia or the flu, because that number was almost 6,000, 5,975. And just so that you know this is not an outlier, let's take a look at another random week. Let's look at about a month ago, July 11th. Well, July 11th, there were 5,463 cases that week of people dying from this particular virus. How many people also, though, were lumped in with this that had pneumonia, the flu, etc.? 8,147. So when someone dies of this particular virus, whether they had pneumonia, heart disease, type 2 diabetes, 100 plus pounds overweight, a particular autoimmune issue, cancer, they had just got out of surgery, whatever it might be, or they're already 78 plus years old, if they had any of those conditions, but they had this virus as well, it's considered a virus-based death. And you may not know that. So the numbers truly are high. This is something for us to be concerned about. But you have to understand, and I'm going to give you the next statistics now, that this does not affect general population. Don't get me wrong. People get sick from this. They absolutely do. Okay? Anybody can catch this. But let's begin to look then at what, just for an average person, the mortality rate is. And again, I keep going back to the, this is out of Statista, it's called, and they keep updating the New York-based statistics as a microcosm for the greater macrocosm. And when you look at the mortality rate for children under 17 years old, and I'm going to give you the school guidelines in just a minute. We'll go over those. It's 0.00069. Just showing you, because they're saying it's less than 1%. Less than 1% of children are affected by this. Well, yeah, that's true. Less than 1% of children, but they make it sound like it's 1 out of 100 children. No, it is fractional. We're talking 0.69 children are affected out of 100,000. But let's go a little bit deeper because that's actually misleading. There's a huge difference for children under 10 years old. It's almost non-existent. The only children that are affected, unfortunately, are those with pre-existing health conditions. And I say unfortunately because it's awful to see children with health conditions in the first place. But those are the children that are most susceptible. Okay, for 18 to 44-year-olds, we're looking at 0.02. Okay, so not 2 out of 100, 0.02. For 45 to 64-year-olds, 0.2. For 65 to 74-year-olds, 0.67. For 75-plus-year-olds, 1.7. So you see how we get now the higher average. So then overall for New York, I think it was 0.02. But let's look at this now. The reason why we have even anywhere close to 0.1, which is still not even 0.1, it's not 99, it's not 1% of people will recover. It's over 99% of people will recover, well over. So why do we even have that close? Well, we have to understand that people 75 and older make up 50% of all of the people that die from this particular virus. And it's even, I would say, swayed more in that direction because cities did something that's very unfortunate, and I would say downright negligent, is they sent elderly people in nursing homes back into the nursing home or assisted living when they knew they had this virus. And that really, not only did it cause a media frenzy, because they didn't talk about how old the people going into the nursing homes may have been that had it. They just thought it made it sound like everybody, no matter the age, but they did this to the people most at risk. And that to me is non-caring, it's negligent, and it's an awful thing to do. It really is. They could have set up different stations. They could have done something more. And again, these are people's parents and grandparents. It's awful. It's awful to even think about that they did that. But we do have to understand that the average age of mortality for this particular virus is between 78 and 81 years old. The average age for life expectancy, 74 to 77 years old. So the average person dying from this particular virus is older than the average life expectancy of at least in the U.S. So again, I'm just giving you by the numbers. You choose what you choose to believe. And what I'll say is this, and this will be my last part to this, because again, I'll give you all the numbers so that you can sort through as well. I believe that, and again, if we really take a hard look at these numbers, we were given a lot of misinformation even after the fact, meaning like in the beginning, nobody really knew, right? And there were some ridiculous statistics thrown out. And I wasn't willing to throw those out because certainly they weren't founded. They weren't backed up by anything. But we've known now. I mean, you listened to my podcast for the last 6 weeks or so. I've been singing the same tune. And it's only been going more as to what I've been sharing, is that we're talking about a media-driven virus. Again, now this is my opinion, a media-driven virus in order to continue to remove people's freedoms and also instill fear so that regulation, policies, etc., can be implemented. And again, I'm not a political person. I say this all the time. I don't associate with either party. It's not what I do. It's not what I even pay attention to. I pay attention to one thing, and that's health. I mean, that's really it. That's the only thing that I'm qualified to speak on. I'm not qualified to speak on anything else. Everything else is simply conjecture, opinion, whatever you want to call it. But what I can tell you is this, the numbers don't lie. And we have in the United States, somehow, if you look at the top 25 countries with cases, the United States essentially has the same amount as all of the other 25 countries the top 25, not just 25 random ones, the top 25. Yes, it's a little over, but you can get my gist from that. And again, you can look on Johns Hopkins. How is it that the United States, with only 330 million people, again, whole world, what, about 8 billion? United States, 330 million. So how is it that the United States has about half or the same amount as the other top 25 countries of cases? Is there some type of agenda going on? And again, this is opinion. I would lean towards yes. And that is because we now see the numbers, and yet we are telling people, keep your businesses closed. Be careful contacting your closest neighbors. Be careful not wearing a mask everywhere. I mean, all of these different things. And even though I said I'm in favor of actually wearing masks so that those people most susceptible, that we at least do our best that they don't get it, I have said that, it is now overboard. And again, so now we're getting into my opinion. I don't want that to sway with the numbers. And you don't have to agree with me. It's a very healthy thing, even if you don't agree with me. I'm okay with that. And I like to listen to your points if you do have another way to look at this. And I am happy about those particular debates as long as they're done in a healthy way. It's just when we keep a closed mind, what happens is we only live by our own dogma. If someone presents new information to me or a new idea, I'm open to it. It doesn't mean that I'm automatically going to accept it, but at least I know where the person's coming from, and very well, I could change my mind. So what I've learned is that we don't wear masks for ourselves if we're worried. Like I'm not worried particularly about getting the virus. Other people may not be worried either. However, I wear a mask for other people, such as my 80-plus-year-old neighbors, all of those other people that may have heart disease, high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, some type of cancer, autoimmune issue. I worry about them. So that's why I wear the mask in public. Okay? But when I see people just wearing masks that don't even work and it's just for show, I basically say, what are we doing here? What are we really talking about? And that's why I get worried. There's actually a lot of good school guidelines, and I'm going to share some of those with you now. But some of them have gone simply too far. So I'm going to give you some of those school guidelines. I'll also link them up. Again, this is from the Center of Disease Control. And they're looking at in-school models, hybrid models where the kids go sometimes and sometimes virtual learning, and then all virtual. Here's the issue. And again, I hope that it doesn't come true. I think that a lot of parents need their children to go back to school for the social aspect of it, and also that they can go back to work, because it's very difficult to be a parent having to stay home with your child or finding childcare and being able to work. So I totally understand that. However, I think that there's going to be such a non-reality, yet a massive media scare this fall and winter, that they're going to go back to virtual. They're going to go back to closures, and they're going to go back to virtual, even though not founded. Even though not founded, I believe that that's where it's going to go. I just want to make sure that you're prepared for that. I don't know that it's going to happen. This is me simply giving you my opinion. I would say be prepared in potentially late October for this to happen. I hope that it doesn't come true. I'm certainly not a predictor of things. I'm more based on what is rather than what might be. But I at least want us to be prepared as a community that there could be mass delays in shipping again. There could be closures of businesses. There could be closures of schools. So let's just be prepared. I don't think it's going to happen anytime right away. If I had to guess, it would be in the latter half of October. Okay, but let's go back to what does the CDC recommend? They recommend that if your child has a temperature of essentially 100 degrees or 100.4 or more, they shouldn't go to school. I completely agree. Why infect other children? Make sure your child does not have a sore throat or other signs of illness like a cough, diarrhea, severe headache, vomiting, or body aches. I agree. If your child has any of those symptoms, they should stay home until those symptoms have subsided or gone away. If your child has been tested positive for this virus, they should not go to school, and you should let people know that they've been in contact with for the last day or two, whenever they had those symptoms, that they now had the virus. And again, I do agree. They say that you should leave points of contact for your school if your child gets sick. Again, agreed. And I don't agree with all of these. I'm giving you some ones that I certainly agree with. I can't talk about some just because of legal-based guidelines. And then, of course, making sure that your children wash their hands. I would say this one I half agree on. We don't want to become incessant about hand washing and sanitizer, neither of which are good for our body and our skin's microbiome. We always talk about our gut microbiome, but what about the skins? So we want to be careful with incessant hand washing for everyone. Your hands are going to be okay as long as there's no cuts on them. You need to make sure, though, that your children are being taught to keep their hands out of their nose, their eyes, or their mouth. And I know with children that it's easier said than done. I have 2 daughters, so I understand. But still, that's a good plan. And the last one is having your children wear their mask. Now, I know schools are implementing this. I don't like the idea of this, but I understand. What schools don't understand is that children, even if they do get sick, especially under the age of 10 or even 12, non-teenager, almost 100% they're going to be completely fine. What a lot of schools don't understand either is that asymptomatic children are typically not carriers for this particular virus. Meaning, even if they test positive and they had it, they most likely didn't pass it on. And this whole thing about not allowing children near each other is also unfounded because they're in the same classroom. So here's the thing. You're breathing air in a room, and let's say the room is 20 by 20 square feet, okay? Normal classroom for a small school, etc. Okay, so you're in that room and you social distance all the children. If the children are breathing, or they cough, or whatever it might be, the air does not stay within their own atmosphere. Children do not walk around in their own bubble. What happens is that air circulates through the room, especially with movement. I know that we're going to have children for the most part at their desks. That's another story. But that air eventually makes its way around the room. As I've shared with you before, typically taking, up to 34 minutes for those virus micron particles that we breathe out to actually fall to the floor. And if the masks really do what they're supposed to do, then everything should stay in the mask, right? So I want to be a little bit careful because this is going to lead to massive amounts of anxiety and fear among children. Something that if your child is below the age of 10, especially below the age of 8, this might stay with them for life. So it's our job as parents and teachers to be able to help alleviate this fear that many children will be going to. Being taught that going close to your friends is going to get you sick and you might die, or it might kill a family member, is very worrisome for a child. Children do not think like adults. The level of rationale is not there yet. They are sponges absorbing what they see. Not always what they hear, but always what they see. If people are living in fear, they're living in terror. Children pick up on that. The level of anxiety and trauma that could be happening right now to children is dramatic. When I see these children basically in plastic pens with masks on, there's no exaggeration. It really breaks my heart to think that we are treating children now as essentially caged animals in these plastic pens. What do we think is going to happen to their psyche? What do we think? Are we not thinking about that? Every action has a repercussion. So let us think, is the action worth it? Is the action worth it? It's not necessarily my job to say yes or no. I have my feelings, but my feelings don't have to be right. They can be right for someone else. So again, I want to share with you, should we close all businesses, which is now leading to more mental health disorders and higher levels of suicide that may rival the same level of mortality rate based on this particular virus? That's a difficult question to answer. I don't have the answer to that. I have my own feelings, but closing everything has devastating long-term consequences as well. So all I want to do is simply look at what is, and then I know there's no perfect solution, but begin to work with your community, because I don't know that we're going to affect things at a mass level, but we can certainly affect change at a local level. And so I really do recommend that you work with your school, that you contact your state representatives, that you support your local businesses, and that you do what the right thing is. And I don't know what the right thing is for you. I really don't. I can't give that advice. But here's what the right thing is for me. For those people that are willing to take me up on my offer in my neighborhood, my elderly neighbors, parents, anybody, allow me or someone else to to go shopping for you. Now, most people don't want that. They want to be able to go out and shop. I understand that. I get it. But if you're most at risk, you are putting yourself at risk. Now, again, the mortality rate is still low, less than 1%, but you're still taking a risk, okay? Especially if you're 65 plus or really 75 plus or have a pre-existing health condition. Ideally, allow other people to help you with that. If you do go out and you're really susceptible, do wear an N95 mask because it's the only one that's 100%. So that's one part to it. The second is that we have to be really careful about allowing businesses to just crumble. Because those can't just be reopened in 3 months from now. That's not how a business works. It takes funding, it takes capital, it takes cash, and they may never come back. Another one is this, and this means a lot to me as well, that we don't give up our personal freedoms for a virus that if we weren't overly worried about the flu, we may not want to get to a level of hysteria with this particular virus as well. And I would be the first person beating the drum and telling you that we need to protect ourselves. We need to be doing this. We need to be doing that. And I have talked to you. I've talked to you about all sorts of different things that you can do to boost your immune system naturally that have been proven to work through scientific research. But what I want to share with you is this. What I've learned over the past couple of decades in my adult life is that typically when freedoms are taken away, they're not typically given back. So it's something that I want you to think about and think long and hard about. And be careful about the erosion of our freedoms for what we're allowed to do and what we're not allowed to do. And whose decision is it really to stop us from doing some of the things that are within our rights that don't affect other people? Just something to think about. Again, those are my opinions. I wanted to leave you with that. Hopefully the science, the facts, the numbers allow you to see where we're really at today. And of course, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Thank you for keeping an open mind. I appreciate you. And as always, if this podcast was helpful, please do feel free to share the show with anyone you believe it could serve. Ever wonder what the best sauna, blue blockers, sleep trackers, wake lights, salt lamps, or other health gadgets are? Or what about the top non-toxic mattresses, sheets, soaps, bath products, toothpaste, and cookware? Or would you like to know the cleanest choices for hemp parts, meal delivery services, supplements, and much more? I personally curated, researched, and now created a resource page of all of my top picks that continues to grow each week. These are the exact products I use in my own life, with my family, in my private practice, and they're the ones I trust. To find out all of my up-to-date recommendations and all the details, simply head on over to stephencabral.com/resources.